Welcome back, BUSN-1360 students. We're continuing on with our Skills Review 5.2 exercise, and this is part 2 because we're picking up at step 14 where we start to learn about pivot tables. So let's jump in. We're starting with step 14, but before we continue, let me move this out of the way so that you can compare your screen to mine. This is a quality check rather than waiting until the very end where you're comparing your work with the solution file or finding out from the grader. Compare it every step along the way. So this way, if you get off a little bit on the instructions, you can correct it before it becomes a bigger issue. We have on a separate tab, For Sale by Owner tab, our chart. We have the data labels. We still have our sales data tab. The chart is no longer here, but we have our averages and counts. And then we have this loan worksheet, and we have not dealt with that yet. I'm going to return to where we left off, which is with our For Sale by Owner tab selected. Step 14. We're going to create a pivot table to summarize the average purchase price of different house types for each agent. So pivot tables are interactive charts or interactive tables. There's a pivot chart as well that summarize, as the directions say there, that summarize data. They're very easy to manipulate. You drag fields from here to there, but you do have to start with a data table so that this pivot table knows how to summarize your information. You're going to see this and you're going to love it. Let's just walk through these steps. I see that step 14 is a little long, but as we perform the steps, you're going to see that it's actually pretty straightforward. So they ask us to return to the Sales Data tab. And here is our table. Now, right now, I've selected a cell outside the table. I want to be someplace inside the table. So we're going to, with any cells selected inside our table, we're going to click the Insert. And we're looking for recommended pivot tables. And that's way over here on the left. Now, you can see I do have some options for creating a pivot table and some different things there, but we're going to this recommended. We want it to make it easy on us. So let's click that. Excel offers different types of pivot tables because it doesn't know what you want to summarize. As I scroll down, you can see an average of the rate, a sum of purchases, sum of bedrooms, sum of mortgage. So many different types. If I scroll all the way back up to the top, it says sum of purchase price by agent. When I hover over it, I get a tooltip that tells me the rest of it. That's the one I want. Make sure that first one is selected. And then I'm going to click OK. I'll point out you can also just go with a blank pivot table here. So what do we have? Over here on the left side, and it doesn't look that impressive yet, we see a pivot table. It has taken all the data in our source, our sales data, and it's summarized it. It made a nice column over here with by owner, Century 21, and it displayed the field that we wanted it to display, which is the purchase price. But it gets interesting over here on the right, because what you see in the top part of the screen here is all of the fields. Remember, fields are the column headings. All of the fields in our table. And 2 of those are selected. They are selected because they appear down here in the bottom. Under rows, it says agent, and under values, it's summarizing that. So it's the sum of the purchase price for each agent. So the agents were by owner, Century 21, Homes and Garden. So see how that works? By dragging and dropping fields into these different areas of the pivot table, you get to see the information that you like. So we did the first step. We returned to the sales data. We verified that we picked the sum of purchase price by agent table. We selected OK. I guess I can put these on the screen so you know where I'm at. We did all those. Now we're going to select any cell in the sum of purchase price column. And once we do that, we're going to change the field settings. And in the summarize value field box, we're going to select average. So we're clicking any of the fields in our sum of purchase price column. And up above, do you see that it says field settings? And it even repeats the cell that it has, or I should say the field that it has selecting, which is the sum of purchase price. So click on field settings. And this is just another way that we can select what is the function that it's performing. And they want us to choose average. I'll point out, although not part of our instructions at this point, that we can format the numbers. Remember that some of those averages, there were many places after the decimal, so we could format those numbers to make them look a little nicer. So we're changing to average. Look over here where it says sum of purchase price. I'm going to click OK. The numbers changed and the column or the field name changed to average. It also changed on this in this panel over on the right. And in fact, if I click that little drop down arrow, you can see that this is another place to change to that average. So let's keep up with our instructions here. We did that, and we selected OK. I'm going to move down a little bit. Now they're going to have us modify this table. We're going to add house type to the pivot table. And they want us to do that simply by clicking the checkbox in the fields list. And it says Excel will automatically add it to the rows and it is going to update the display. Let me move this out of the way. So now that we know that, we're looking over here in the fields, and they wanted us to add house type. Now, what kind of data is house type? If I go back and look at my sales data, here's house type. So it's text. Well, it knows, I'm going to go back, notice we have a sheet 1 down here now. It knows that it can't sum it, it can't average the house type, so where should it add it? And since I already have rows, it's going to add that into the rows. I'm going to check that. Do you see down here in the bottom, it added it? I'll tell you that you can also click and drag fields. See how I could drag it into different places? I'm going to put my mouse in a place where it's not going to have any impact. So in other words, it returns back. But it added it underneath agent. So what does this mean? Well, I can understand it if I look at my table. My row is grouped first by agent. So it went through all the data, and the first thing it did is it said collect all the by owners, collect all the Century 21, collect all the homes and gardens. When we use the word grouped, this is very much a database word. We group data together. But think about this. What if you had a bunch of invoices, or where you have to pay commissions out, for example, and they're all written on pieces of paper, and so you want to organize them by agent. You might have a table, and you might put the papers. Here's one for by owner, here's one for Century 21, and you put them in piles. In other words, you have grouped them. Once you have grouped them on your table in individual piles, you might then come back and sort by or group by a different identifier, in this case, house type. So house type, how many did by owners sell for colonial? How many are condominiums? How many are contemporary? So you might sort or group the invoices or the sales documents by that subcategory. And that's what we've done. Isn't this a very fast way to see information? That took 2 seconds. If we did not want to see that, we could grab house type. I'm hovering my mouse over house type. You see I have 4-sided arrow. Press and drag it onto the spreadsheet. You see that X that's there? Release your mouse. I'm back to my original table. If I go to house type again, I can drag it back to the rows, and you see that it's grouped again. I'm going to do that again because I want you to understand, not just follow, but understand. So drag house type again and drop it out there on the worksheet. This time I'm going to grab house type and I'm going to put it under filters. What just happened? Above my table in cell A1, and this means it applies to the entire worksheet. It applies to my table. I have that field and it currently says all. If I click on this drop-down box, now I can just select one of these, let's say colonial. What I see now is an average for all the colonial sales of each agent. I have filtered all that. That's what that field does. Notice also if I click that drop-down box that I could decide to select multiples. So maybe I want to see colonial and ranch houses and click OK. So again, by agent, I see only an average only of those two house types. Now I don't want that filtered anymore, so I'm going to select all and click OK. And I don't even want that on my page anymore. So you guessed it. I'm going to come over here to filters, grab that field, and drop it out on the worksheet so that it's deleted. Well, maybe we should go back to following our instructions. They wanted house type, and they just had us check the box, but we know it moved here below agent under rows. Well, now in our instructions, they say to take house type and move it just by clicking and dragging it to the columns. So now when I look at my table, I still see those agents, but I see all of the different house types broken out across, and I even see a grand total in this column, and I see a grand total going across in this row. So I have a grand total for the agent, and I have a grand total for colonials and for condominiums. Isn't this just a wonderful way to get information out of data? You can quickly look at information from many different perspectives, and you can answer questions presented to you by your boss, by your team, by your stakeholders. If they say, yes, but how does the data break down this way? Or how does the data break down that way? All it takes is that you drag and drop. So let's just verify we're following the instructions. We added the house type to the pivot table, and then to summarize the house type data for each agent as columns, we click and drag that to the column row. So that was a long step, but wow, was it powerful. And yes, I introduced some more knowledge so you can learn while you earn. I did not save that, so I want to do that. Let's save. And now we can go back and continue. So on step 15, we're going to add those sparklines. You're going to love this. This is not necessarily related to pivot tables. Please do not think, oh, I can't have a sparkline because I don't have a pivot table. You can add sparklines to any type of table. They're just doubling up on what they're teaching you here. So we're going to go to cells B5 through E9, and we're going to add those sparklines. So let me move these instructions out of the way. We're going to select B5 through E9. So that's all the data in this table, which is a summary. And I want to point out one other thing. When you look in these cells, do you notice there's no formula? Excel is dynamically calculating and displaying this, but it's not inserting formulas into these cells. These cells are changing constantly. Let's select again B5 through E9. Don't include those grand totals. On our insert ribbon, we're going to go across past charts all the way to Sparklines. And when you get to Sparklines, we're going to click column. So it says choose the data you want, and we've chosen B5 through E9. And for the location, they want us to choose, and I'm just going to move this to the side, they want us to select G5 through G9. Click OK. Remember in our solution file, and I'm going to click away so that you can see that. Remember in our solution file, we saw these little graphs, these little column charts here. So as I look at the data for by owner, the first value is the smallest. Condominiums is a little higher, contemporary is a little higher, ranch is even higher. And the bars in cell G5 reflect that. In comparison, if I look at Century 21, they have pretty good sales of colonial, a lot more sales for condominium, but then fewer sales for contemporary. And again, I can see that with those bars. So rather than trying to slowly dissect all the numbers in this table, I can look at those sparklines and get a quick read of where were the highs and lows. For example, by owner increases as we go across the table. In contrast, Remax decreases. It has a lot of colonials and then goes down, and we can see that immediately from those sparklines. This was only, I'm going to click on those sparklines again so that I have that selected. Notice that you have a ribbon that comes with those sparklines. There are many things that you can, I'm going to say chart with this. These are little bitty charts in this. Many styles that you can apply. I'm going to press the escape key on my keyboard. You can change colors for those spark lines. You can change markers, especially if you do lines, so that certain points are formatted, if they're negative, highs and lows. This is a really powerful tool. And again, you can make sure to put markers on your high and low points. So check out Sparklines if you really want to impress your boss. Let's save that before we move on. So that was step 15. We selected our table, just the data values. We went to insert. It was kind of like adding a chart. There's a different group. We created those spark lines. We told them where to display, and then we clicked OK. On to step 16. Now we're going to create a pivot chart from the pivot table. So let's just kind of get into this. We need to click someplace inside our table here so that Excel understands. And you can see I have different ribbons now. I don't have a Sparkline ribbon. I have Pivot Table Analyze and Design in my ribbon. And they want us to pick the Pivot Table Analyze. And now they want us to click Pivot Chart. Pivot Table Analyze, I go down and I go across over here to Pivot Chart. You can see there's so many different options here and things that we can explore. I'm clicking Pivot Chart, and they want us to pick the first bar chart. Now, folks, be careful. This is not a bar chart. This is what we sometimes think of when we say bars, but this is a column chart. So look down here on the side and make sure you change the category to bar. Bars for Excel go across. Okay, so we're looking for a bar chart. It says select the very first type here, and then we're going to click OK. And this agrees, by the way, with the solution file. So if you got off and you were keeping track of that solution file, you would see that if you had columns, it's not the same as this bar chart. It says if necessary, move the pivot chart to another worksheet so it does not cover, to another part of the worksheet, I'm sorry, so it doesn't cover the pivot table. Just like our other charts, we want to get that four-sided arrow, and this would print very nicely if we just positioned it underneath. I'll give you a little tip. If you hit your print button when you have your charts selected, any one of your charts, then that's a very fast way to print the chart on a page by itself. But I could click over here to the side and I could print, and I would have the data as well as the chart on the page. Let's save that. Back to our instructions. So we selected a cell in the pivot table. We went to our pivot table Analyze and chose the pivot chart. We made sure to select a bar chart, and then we created our chart. On to step 17. Now with step 17, we're moving on from pivot tables, and we're going to start using something called What-If analysis. You have probably heard about this before because management and in business, we love to do this. We say, but what if we did not spend money over here and instead we spent it on something else? What if we spent it on new machinery? No, what if we spent it on designing a new product? What if scenarios are very helpful even in our personal lives, as we're going to see. So what are they going to have us do? They're going to have us use the data in the loan worksheet. We haven't been to that one yet. To run a what if scenario for a client to show loan payments for a variety of interest and loan lengths. So, and it does say this what if scenario requires a 2 variable data table. So let me move this out of the way because the setup is kind of key here. Change to the loan worksheet. It's the loan worksheet. And on this table, now currently cell A1 is selected, but I'm going to click away so that you can see. What do we have here? Up in that orange cell, we have 3.70%, and that looks like some kind of interest rate. As we go across on row 1, we see 200,000, perhaps, and it says borrowed, so that's how much money. Looks like maybe we're trying to buy a house. And then look down below that. We have many different rates. So there's a calculated amount, $1,180. We're going to look at that in a moment. But we have 3.7, 3.75, 3.8, all these different interest rates down to 4.65%. Imagine that you are calling around to different banks, and each bank is going to quote you something slightly different. How does that impact how much house you can buy? How does it impact your payments? How do you keep track of all this? Well, across the top, Excel is going to make this easy for you. In addition to this variable here, this interest rate, that's one of your variables. Remember, the problem said there's 2 variables. Well, the other variable is the number of years, 15 years, 20 years, and 30 years. So to begin, if you're going to do this for your home, first of all, you could start with their worksheet and just change it to meet your needs, right? But if you were going to do this, you're going to buy a new car, you're going to buy a new house. Make a table, list your interest rates, list how many months or how many years across, and then leave this cell empty. Because in the cell, in this case it's B5, we're going to create a formula to do some calculations. And Excel is going to use this formula to fill out this table. It's going to put all those different variables. It's going to cycle through this. So let's look at the variables. And here's a really cool way to do this. We know that we can use this F sub X function, this insert function, to add new functions to a cell. But if you select a cell that has a function in it, you can click it to open it up. And this helps explain the function to us, the arguments. So let's look at the 3 required, because they're in bold, these 3 required arguments. The first one is not just A2. It's A2 divided by 12. Well, A2 is 3.7. And that is the first rate that's in our table. It's one of our variables. So 3.70% is an annual. When we talk about APRs, that's annual percentage rate. If I'm going to make monthly payments, then we need to divide that by 12. So you can do that right here in the function, and that's what they've done. The next one, what is NPER? I mean, rate you can kind of figure out, but NPER? Well, if I click on that line, remember that this function box explains it to us down here at the bottom. It says NPER is the total number of payments for the loan. Okay, well, it tells us that that value is in cell C2. And they've typed in here 20, so there's 20 years. Well, remember, this is one of our variables that we're going to cycle through. We might, to get maybe a bigger house, we go 30 years to lower our payments. But we want to pay that house off quickly, so maybe we go 15 years. 20 is kind of in the middle. Maybe that's a good compromise. Okay, yeah, but we're going to make those payments monthly. We're not going to pay one time once a year, every year for 20 years. We're going to pay every month. So we have to multiply that by 12, and we do it right here in this in per box because this is the number of payments for the loan. And you can see right now it's telling us that if we multiply 12 by 20, that's 240. This next one has something else that's key in it. You saw the divide by 12 and the multiply by 12. Notice that PV has a negative sign in front of it. Well, why do we have that? What we're calculating is how much money do we owe somebody? Well, when we owe somebody money, don't we say we're in the red? We say, oh, we're in the hole on that. We're in the red. You owe. And when you owe, it's negative. But it's kind of weird to say, oh, I'm going to have to pay the bank negative $1,180. That wouldn't really make sense. So if you will just simply insert a negative sign before the cell, it'll make it a positive number, which just is easier to talk about. Okay, it's easier said. So C1, what is cell C1? Cell C1 is that $200,000 that we borrowed. So we see that here, and we see it, of course, on our spreadsheet. Now, I don't need to put values into FV or into type. You can certainly explore those. But again, Excel has already calculated that answer. So I'm clicking OK. I can click cancel because we didn't change anything. And that formula is at the top of the variable that's running up and down this way, and to the left of our second variable, which is going across. So how do we do this what-if analysis? We're going to select cells B5, which includes our formula, all the way down to cell E25. Oops, I'm sorry, I clicked too many. Let me do that again. B5 through E25. And we're going back to this data tab. I'm telling you folks, this is such a powerful tab as you're working with data. So many things that we can do, but I want you to go all the way to the end of this ribbon where it talks about forecasting. And you see this what if analysis button. And I'm going to click on this little drop down box, and I want you to see there are 3 very powerful tools, and I encourage you. We don't do scenario manager in this exercise, but look, as I hover over it, it says it creates different groups of values of scenarios, and you can switch between them. So here's what's powerful about that. You can have scenario A, scenario B, scenario C, pull up this spreadsheet to your boss and switch between each one of those scenarios very quickly to answer their question. You don't have to sit there and try to calculate things every time. We're going to look at goal seek in just a moment, but right now we are clicking on data table. So you hear about people saying this is a data table, but this is a what if analysis of the data table. So click on that. What is our row? Well, this is going to be C2, and we know that from our formula. Because remember we said the row, this is our row, 15 years, 20 years, and 30 years, and that's the value that we entered into our payment formula. What is our column going to be? Well, if the row is the years, oops, let me click down here, then the column is going to be A2. So this is where our percentage is up here. So we have our variables, we have our formula. I'm going to click on OK. Just like that. How fast was that? If I click inside this, I want you to look at your formula bar, but don't panic. Remember how when we were looking at the table, we saw that our summary row used functions like subtotal? Well, now we're working in a data table. It does kind of make sense if you look at it. It's looking at C2 and A2 as we go through here, and it's just simply based on where it's at in the row, cycling through different variables. For this interest rate at 20 years, our payment would be $1,196.21. And so you can look at this and see, what can I afford? And doesn't this encourage you to say, gosh, if I call the bank And if I can get them down from, 4% loan to a 3.7% loan, you can see the money you saved. And maybe that enables you to pay fewer years and pay them off more quickly. That is a data table. So what were the key parts of that? The key parts of it is, first of all, we started out, they formatted this, but they just said, here's how much we're borrowing, here's what our interest rate is, and here's how many years we're currently thinking. And then they said, wait a minute. If we go ahead and set up our payment function, and that's the new function, PMT, and we used Excel to help us. The key thing here, the very, very key thing, is that you have to remember if it's an annual percentage rate to divide by 12, and if you're making monthly payments, to make sure that you multiply by 12. But we said, okay, we'll put those in. And then all we did, nothing magical here, we just typed in our variable amounts. And then these are, of course, the years that we're looking at. And we selected our formula, including the total data range. On our data ribbon, we went to What If Analysis, and we did Data Table. And we specified our two variables. One variable was in the row, and one variable was in the column. Folks, I hope that you find that helpful, because I think this is just a really powerful thing. Save that. Let's go back to our instructions. And I think we did all these steps. On to step 18, and this is our last step before we save and upload. But I can't emphasize enough that this is another really powerful feature of Excel. Excel is just such a great tool. Again, we're going to work on this loan worksheet, but we're going to move over to some formulas they had over to the side. And this time, we're still going to use what-if analysis, but we're going to use a tool called Goal Seek. So let's just walk through this. So here's the formulas that they have set up over here. And if I click in cell H4, I can see it's a similar formula. In fact, if I go back to my insert function box, it's very similar. It says H5. So what is H5 is right below that. That's our rate this time. So in other words, not A2, but H5 is our rate. They have remembered that that's an annual rate. They divided by 12. They said H6 is the number of payments. In other words, 30 years. I'm going to pay my house off in 30 years, but I have to multiply by 12 because the bank is going to want those monthly payments. And then they remembered to put that negative sign in front of H9. So where is H9? You see it right above the box here? It's that $200,000. We're going to owe the bank $200,000, but that's the amount that we're asking for our loan. So they put a negative sign up there so that we'll ultimately have a positive number. And as we saw in the cell, Excel is telling us right now that this is going to be about $920 a month. But what if, I think, in this what-if analysis, I think I can stretch a little bit, and I could pay off as much as $950 a month. So what are they going to have us do? Well, in the instructions, they told us to select cell H4, again on the Data tab. Again, we're going over to What-If Analysis, and this time we're going to Goal Seek. Tell you something else, folks. Do you see ... after each one of these? Do you know what that means? That means I'm going to ask you a question. So don't ever be concerned that as soon as you click Goal Seek or as soon as you click Table Data that it's going to take off on you and it's going to make some kind of change. ... means that there's a dialog box that is about to be displayed. Goal Seek. Let me move this up closer here. So set the cell. Well, we're going to verify that the outcome cell H4. So this is the outcome. Right now we have a calculated value in there. So that's what we're going to be adjusting. We want that value. We're telling it, I don't want that value to be $920. I think I can pay $950. So I'm going to just type that in there, $950. I want the formula in that cell to come up with the amount $950. Well, what's legal to change? What will you allow me to change? I'm going to allow you to change H9. Now, we could change the rate if we wanted to, but what I'm saying is the amount that I'm going to borrow. So I've clicked in by changing cell, and I'm going to click on that 200,000. Click OK. It says goal seek with cell H4 found a solution. And it says the target value of 950, the current value. So look at what happened. Look at cell H4. It now says 950, but this is a formula. So what changed? Well, what changed was how much I can borrow. So I can get just a little bit of extra house, or maybe I can say, you know what? Since I know I can pay $950 a month, I know I'm going to need about $6,000 for some repairs, some upgrades. So I'm going to go ahead and borrow $206,000. You see how this works? Is this not just the greatest? And then I'm going to click OK to accept that. So, again, think about what you did here. You have the formula already. Do you remember our keystroke control tick mark to display the formula? We have the formula in cell H4. We went to what if analysis. This time we went to goal seek because we're only changing one variable. With data table, we changed two variables. With goal seek, we're changing one. And we told it, this is where the formula is in cell H4. And we want that to come out to, let me move this up here. We want this to come out to some value. And by changing cell, and we told it what it could change. And that happened to be the amount we could borrow. And in fact, as I do this, look at the amount to borrow. It's not exactly $206,394. There's a lot of places after that decimal. But it really helps us very quickly figure out what is our payment, how much can we borrow. Isn't this just the most powerful tool? You can use their worksheet so that you have it set up and calculate for your car payment, for your house payment. Very handy function. Whew. We learned a lot in this chapter. Click anywhere on the web browser page. Control Home to get to the top. I'm not ready to submit because I still have my worksheet open here in the background. But I do want to save this. I'm going to close this. I'm going to move this over to the side a little bit. I still can't quite see my folder, so I'm going to minimize this. And I'm going to open my Excel 5 folder, and I'm going to move it to the right a little bit. You can certainly use your Restore button to display these side by side. And I'm going to make sure I have my Excel 5-2 file, press, drag. Okay, folks, this was a long one with many, many steps. I did some demonstration, which always concerns me because I might have affected something as I was demonstrating tasks. There it is. There it is. Look at that. Yes, 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 yes. We have done some excellent studies of Excel, and we're going to have fun because first of all, you're going to take your Excel test. Don't forget that. More on that later. And then after we wrap up Excel, you're going to move into PowerPoint. So looking forward to it. Congratulations. I know you've learned a lot. Thanks, folks.